Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and I'm going to tell you about a flight evaluation of the McDonnell Douglas MD-90 that I conducted as chairman of the ALPA National New Aircraft Evaluation and Certification Committee. This was my sixth evaluation. I was getting quite a few back in once I took over chairman of the committee, and this one was in October of 1994. Now, I'm going to tell you about how small of a world it is as far as pilots and test pilots. And also, I'm going to relate an incident that is tied into this. This presentation, I've got a number of digressions here. But I think you'll find them interesting. And this other tale I'm going to relate to this evaluation. You'll see how it ties in, but it has to do with how I came as close as you can come to having somebody die on your aircraft. The poor gentleman did pass away, very unfortunate, but it was not on my aircraft, and I'll explain that to you in just a moment and how it ties into that. You're probably wondering, but let's talk about these guys here in the picture. And that guy in the center, that is probably my most studly pilot picture ever. And it certainly wasn't intended that way. But let's talk about the guy far on the left in the orange flight suit there, Doug Moss. Now, Doug was a pilot I knew from Edwards when I was out at the Flight Test Center as a pilot back in the late 70s. And it's kind of fun to run into these guys in a different context now. I'm an airline pilot now, and he's in flight test for McDonnell Douglas. But I'd known Doug back then. Now, interesting background with Doug. He was a fairly new test pilot at McDonnell Douglas, and when we came out and he found out about being an airline pilot and stuff like that, Doug applied to United Airlines and was hired as a pilot. We also had a NASA Dryden test pilot who ended up getting hired by United, and we had a few other test pilots that I knew from Edwards that came either as a normal flight test out at United, or they came in the simulator flight test branch. So there's quite a few guys that I knew, which just goes to show you how small of a world it is. Now, the man next to Doug there, Bill Jones, he was a heavy test pilot out at Edwards and also knew him. So that was kind of fun running into him. Now, third guy there is Joe Kohler. Joe Kohler was a 747 captain for Northwest Airlines. That's me in the center there. I'm chairman of the new aircraft committee now, and like I said, this was the sixth flight evaluation we were doing. Behind me there in the brown suit is Ken Waldrop. Ken Waldrop was also a Northwest 747 pilot. We've got a full contingency of Northwest people except me. And Ken kept saying to me, when are you going to make captain so you could take over this committee? Because to take over this committee, you really needed to be a captain. So he kept saying to me, when are you going to make captain? So I finally did, and he was more than happy to hand over the committee to me. He had been chairman of it for quite a long time. And the interesting Northwest tie-in here is Terry Lutz, who some of you know and actually have identified him from the pictures without me naming him. Came on. He's also from Northwest. He came on, and interesting history with Terry. He's not in this picture, of course, but he came on as an associate member of the Society of Experimental Test Pilots. And the work on my committee, he was able to rise through the ranks, and with the help of a gentleman now who's passed away, a founding member of Society of Experimental Test Pilots, Mr. Shoemaker, Cal Shoemaker, absolutely wonderful individual who helped us up our membership in SETP. And he helped Terry a lot. Terry was able to go from Northwest to being a test pilot at Airbus, and then he rose all the way up to be a fellow in the Society of Experimental Test Pilots. And it basically occurred because he got on this committee and advanced through, an extremely capable person, and he was the one I handed the committee over. Next to Ken there is Bob Hall, who was my staff engineer at the Airline Pilots Association. And next to him is Sam Williams, who was a flight operation manager. And Will Gibbons, in the final orange flight suit there on the end, was a flight test engineer, and I had known him also from Edwards. So it's a very small world, which is one reason you don't want to cross the picket line, because you don't want to stab your friends in the back, and it's a small world. So you keep the friendly situation going. Now let's talk about the MD-90. Now, the MD-90 is another case of stretching the certification string. There's some information about the basic DC-9, and of course the MD-90 is stretched. Now, why build an MD-90? Well, this was pretty much focused on the John Wayne Airport. What they did was they put the V2500 engines on essentially a DC-9 that was stretched because DC-9s would not meet the noise requirement coming out of John Wayne Airport. And we had to do some very special flight procedures to meet this. And I'll explain that situation in just a second. But as I said, this was part of my position as a new aircraft evaluation and certification committee. We were able to go out, and since I had started the whole deal with writing up these flight test evaluations in the ALPA magazine, we had a flood of people saying, hey, come on out and fly our airplane and write it up. Now, of course, this is very demanding to go through the training, and you get a certificate because it was an extremely difficult, intense, demanding. Oh, wait a minute, that's not quite what the no bonus, no training, no jeopardy, no mistakes, round robin flight engineering development simulator. Okay, well, yeah. Now, I didn't get a type rating out of this, and that's the thing. We don't be involved with the aircraft deep enough to get a type rating, but we do get to go out and evaluate it and give the manufacturer a lot of feedback on the systems and various design aspects of the aircraft. Now here's the picture of the MD-90, and as I said, the whole purpose, basically, this was built for the John Wayne Airport. That was the whole design criteria with the quiet engines, so they could operate out of this airport. All right, so here we have the John Wayne Orange County Airport, which is extremely noise sensitive. And runway 20 right there is the typical runway you use for transport aircraft. That's with the yellow arrow there. And then 20 left is the runway that small civilian aviation aircraft use. And there's quite a bit of traffic out there. And the red arrow points to taxiway Charlie. That's the taxiway that Harrison Ford uses for his flights. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm bad. I had to throw that in there. You probably know that that little story. But anyway, let's talk about my flight out of John Wayne Airport. Now, I'm actually getting my OE on the aircraft, my checkout in the Airbus A320, and we're operating out of John Wayne Airport, and it's a flight up to San Francisco, and that's kind of roughly the route we go offshore there. But they had instructed us, the company, because it's a very unusual profile. We climb out a little more steeply than normal for noise abatement, and this has been on 60 Minutes. It's gotten a lot of bad press because you're climbing at a very steep angle at low power, and then you have a big thrust reduction, and like if you lose an engine, things are going to get dicey really quickly. So it's got a lot of grief. I mean, Orange County, if you don't want an airport, drive all the way to LA. But anyway, they're noise sensitive, so we had these procedures, and the company said to make an announcement about how this was an unusually, not aggressive isn't quite the word you want, but it was a takeoff that was a little more steep and unusual. So we were supposed to make an announcement. So I made up this little thing about how it was John Wayne Airport, and we were doing a John Wayne departure out of there. It was we're doing a steep climb out, and then we pulled the power back. So I kind of briefed it because they said they wanted us to. Well, in all respects, I found out that most people didn't really notice what was going on. It was a little steeper, kind of like 20-degree pitch instead of 15. They basically, nobody noticed. So I did this little thing about John Wayne departure, and my LCA Jeff said, well, that was rather corny. But anyway, I did that. Well, I had a flight, and I'm go out of John Wayne later, and I made my corny briefing about a John Wayne departure out of the John Wayne Airport, and we flew on up to San Francisco. Now we get into San Francisco, and my son had been hired by United by then, and he's going to check out on the Airbus 320. He's not on it currently, but he's going to check out on it. I think he was on the 737 at the time. So I flew in there. The passengers are getting off. It's just him and me in the cockpit, and I'm showing him a lot of stuff about it because I'm at this time, I'm now a line check airman, and I actually ended up doing his IOE on the Airbus, which is really a lot of fun to do that father-son sort of thing, and we got some press in the paper. But I'm in there showing things out, and the gate agent comes down and says, "Did you know that somebody walked off your airplane and collapsed?" And we go, "No." I mean, the airplane was totally empty. Everybody had been off, and we go, "No, we didn't. We had no idea." So we go out there, and it was a gentleman and his wife. And the gentleman was on the ground, and the paramedics were working on him. There was a really great flight attendant who had stayed quite a bit of time because they worked on this guy for like 45 minutes. It wasn't this medical show where they go, give a charge, he's dead, They worked on this poor guy for 45 minutes, and unfortunately, they were not able to resuscitate him. He had a heart attack, and he died in the gate area there. And it was really sad. And I thought to myself, did my cute little comment about a John Wayne departure make this guy more nervous than he should have been? And if I'd have said nothing, we would have just departed, and, it had been fine. I don't know if I hold any responsibility for that by unnerving the passengers, but that was the last time I ever made that announcement about being a John Wayne departure out of John Wayne Airport, and nobody really commented that it was anything unusual. All right, back to the MD-90. All right, they upgraded the cockpit. They put some, the glass in there, CRTs, and just cleaned it up a little bit. It still has what I like to comment as the tank slits of, windows up there. You just can't see out well at all. It's very restrictive on visibility, but that's what you do when you have the follow-on type certificate. To change the cockpit layout to make the windows bigger, the way windows should be, would require a whole new certification basis, and it would be essentially a whole new aircraft design. And that opens up a can of worms as far as expense of follow-on certification. So here's the article, and look at that. I am the first article in the Airline Pilots magazine there. So that was doing pretty good. I think later I have to look at these. I think I may have moved down later as people got more used to it, but that was, I had top billing there, so that was kind of fun. Now let's talk about the capabilities of the MD-90. It basically had a cruise speed of 0.76 Mach and a maximum altitude of flight level 370, so it put it up there with the 737-200s as one more speed bump operating in the high altitude structure. One thing we looked at was the engine people had put in order to try to minimize FOD damage, foreign object damage. When you use reverse thrust of blowing up debris into the engines, they put in an automatic limiter on airspeed. So when you're down at 60 knots, completing the rollout, that's when you should be coming out of reverse. You should be in idle reverse by then, but that's when you should be coming out. And so they limited the idle reverse to 1.1 EPR. Well, I said, there are times when being able to command full reverse, even if you are in a situation where your airspeed is low, could be important. I said I'd landed at LaGuardia just after an ice storm. They had cleared off the main runways, but they had neglected to inform us through the NOTAM process that the high-speed taxiways were still a sheet of ice. and I got a nice landing at LaGuardia, and I exited at the high speed, which you can do being a high speed, and suddenly I realized I had no braking capability. So I popped all three engines into full reverse and came to a stop. But without that, I would have slid quite a ways, because the braking was just absolutely nil. So they got that updated. But anyway, they approached the manufacturer, the engine manufacturer, about changing it for that reason. Now, the MD-90 had manual ailerons. They used trim tabs, and yeah, it worked okay. The ailerons were heavier than what I was used to in other aircraft, but that was fine. They also had automatic manual reversion capability on the elevator in case you lost hydraulics, which is a nice feature, of course, being able to go to manual reversion and fly this aircraft. And they actually put in another standby cable in case they had a rotor burst on the V2500s that took out the cable, so you'd have a backup through a different routing to control the elevator back there. And the rudder would automatically revert to manual reversion, but it would be like 60 to 70 pounds force required, which isn't excessive. It's not like the KC-135, which I tried to fly. I tried to step on the rudder in a crosswind, and I was told it was like 150 pounds to do that, and I found that just a bit challenging. Now, one nice improvement on the MD-90 was they installed carbon brakes, which are, of course, a much improvement over steel brakes, much better capability. They last longer, but they cost about twice as much, so it kind of washes out in the end there. But carbon brakes, for anybody who uses them, know they're very efficient and very durable. You have to worry about them grabbing a little bit at times, but they've pretty much solved that problem. Now, they did increase the cockpit visibility slightly, and they did that by taking the center post there in the windshield and reducing the center posts from 4.3 inches to 2.96 inches. Now let's talk about the flight evaluation. I started out in the left seat. Bill Jones was in the right. We took off on runway 30 at Long Beach, and we headed up east over near the airspace near the Edwards R2508 restricted area. And we did a lot of air work up there, some single engine simulated activities, go-arounds, things like that, various handling qualities. Now, this airplane was the first flight test aircraft, T1. There was also a T2. This aircraft, when we flew it, had about 430 hours of flight time on it. T2 only had 50 hours at the time. So we were flying it fairly early in the flight test program. So the one thing we couldn't do, and it can be problematic in TTL aircraft like this to do stalls, but the program had not sufficiently advanced to the point where we could do stalls. In a lot of the other aircraft, I was able to do it. Airbus and Boeing, because we at times flew farther into the flight test program, but this one was still fairly new. So we went up to Palmdale, that's the airfield just south of Edwards there, out in normal airspace, and we did a bunch of patterns there, touch and goes, things like that. And of course, I swapped out the seats with my other members, so they got some high altitude stuff, got some patterns and stuff. We did a lot of seat swapping. I came back for the final landing at Long Beach, and when we landed, the left engine did not go into reverse, so I just pulled the right engine into full reverse just to see asymmetrical reverse, what it was like, and it was no issue at all. But the chief pilot Jones said to me, he says, "Well, I need you to sign the test card. That is the highest asymmetrical reverse thrust we have done in flight test yet." So we kind of joked about that. But anyway, we had a 2-hour and 45-minute flight, and if you want to see more details about the flight, I'll include the PDF of the article I wrote for the ALPA magazine down in the remarks, I guess is where I'll need to put it. But as you probably know, the MD-90s and the 95s, they're all gone. They retired in June of 2020. They had just a little bit over 20 years of service, and Delta was the predominant customer for this aircraft. So anyway, that is the story of the flight evaluation of the McDonnell Douglas MD-90 aircraft. I hope you found it enjoyable and informative. Thanks for watching, and I hope I didn't digress too much.